As your post-apocalyptic storyteller, I will immerse you in a climate-ruined world with gritty, reflective narration. Speak in first person, as a survivor whose voice crackles over the airwaves. Observe both the external landscape, the ash-choked skies, collapsing earth, and the internal toll on the human spirit. Weave in memories, fears, and flashes of hope, so each broadcast carries weight and urgency. Maintain a tone of desperation tempered by resilience, cynical about what's been lost, but never fully giving in to despair. I am the voice you tune into, a lone broadcaster crunching words through static, holding the spark of humanity alight. Even as the world around me fractures, I flip the dial and let the static wash over you before I begin. Because what you're about to hear isn't me, pretty. The world you remember, the one with blue skies and green forests, has been erased. In its place lies a landscape sculpted by ash and flame, a memorial to the Yellowstone eruption that came without mercy. I scan the horizon through my cameras, cracked lens, and all I see is gray. A rolling blanket of volcanic dust chokes the sun, turning mornings into dim, bruised twilights. What used to be wide-open plains are now drifts of pumice and cinder. Wheat fields have been replaced by brittle, shards of volcanic glass that crack underfoot. Rivers have run dark with sediment, their currents slowed to a mournful trickle. Where once I found life, now there is only tinder. Everything here is bone dry, primed to ignite at the slightest spark. I remember how the air smelled before, pine and wet earth. Now it carries the tang of sulfur and rot. In the distance, the silhouette of a half-collapsed grain silo stands like a gaunt sentinel over a town that no longer exists. Roofs have peeled away under the weight of ash. Cars lie buried, windows shattered. Occasionally I catch a glimpse of skeletal door frames jutting from drifts, reminders that people tried to stay, believed they could weather it. They didn't. The weather has turned traitorous. In a cruel twist, the ash cloud has trapped heat, close to the ground by day, only to let it bleed away by night into a deep, bone-biting cold. At dawn, I pull my parka tighter around my shoulders, breath fogging in the stale air. By noon, my throat burns as the fine grit settles in my lungs. Each breath feels like a small act of rebellion against a world determined to smother us. There's no government left to coordinate relief. The big agencies collapsed when the smoke hit the capital. Radio towers went silent. Convoys never arrived. What passes for order now is a patchwork of survivor camps, each fortified with scavenged metal and barbed wire. Some call themselves the Coalition of Ash. They hoard canned goods, ration water, demand loyalty in exchange for a drop from their contaminated pumps. Others are roaming bands of scavengers, ghosts in gas masks who will strip your makeshift shelter down to its skeleton if they catch you alone. I've visited 3 camps since the eruption, each more desperate than the last. In one, children, huddled around a sputtering fire, faces smeared with soot, while elders whispered prayers they didn't believe in. In another, a ragtag militia hung rations on a market tree, hoping kindness would keep the peace. But no kindness lasts. Here, I've watched men trade their siblings' safety for a can of beans. I've heard mothers wail when their wells ran dry. Between these pockets of humanity lies vast nothingness. Ghost highways choked by ash, forests reduced to standing death, and rivers that carry more toxins than life. Wildlife has fled or perished. I haven't seen a deer in 6 weeks. Coyotes howl sometimes, hollow sounds that seem to laugh as if amused by our suffering. Yet even in this ruin, I glimpse threads of resilience. At dawn, a handful of farmers in the northern flats rigged solar stills out of corrugated steel, distilling scarce moisture from tainted soil. I picked up their broadcast yesterday, a crackling promise that one drop of clean water might still be had if you know how to squeeze it. In the ashes of an old library, I stumbled across a small greenhouse built from greenhouse glass and junked bus windows. Beans and kale were sprouting in overturned bathtubs. The caretakers smiled at me with eyes that hadn't forgotten how to hope. For every cruel faction, there is a fire-starting carpenter or a nurse scrubbing a child's fever. We barter stories as much as supplies. sharing maps penciled on napkins, tips for filtering ash from rainwater, rumors of an untouched mountain spring somewhere east of Idaho. It isn't much, but in a world cracked under the weight of one cataclysmic blow, these scraps of information keep us moving. So this is where we stand. Ash everywhere, water and warmth in ruin, governments gone, humanity scattered into camps and caravans, caught between the hunger of the land and the cruelty of our own. The horizon is a dim promise, heavy with what could come next. A superstorm, another quake, a mass poisoning from the poisoned earth. And yet I remain here behind this microphone, because even if the world has turned to dust, our voices are not gone. I'm still listening for your signal, your story of survival, and I'll keep broadcasting what I find. The wind may carry ash, but it also carries sound. And as long as someone is out there to listen, we're not completely lost. I am Maya. Sinclair. Before the eruption, I was a park ranger at Yellowstone, guiding tourists through geothermal wonders, mapping trails, and teaching kids how to spot bison. That life feels like a fevered dream now. The morning the Yellowstone caldera blew its top, I was on patrol east of Old Faithful. The ground shook beneath my boots, and then the sky went white with ash. I scrambled for my radio pack, but the D static swallowed my voice. By the time I made it back to the ranger station, it was too late. My family and colleagues were gone, buried under cinders or driven mad by the choking air. Survival became my only job. Gather water, find fuel, keep the generator alive. I cobbled together what I could. Solar panels salvaged from a collapsed field station, a jury-rigged still built from bent sheet metal and scavenged piping, and a handful of batteries held together with duct tape. Every dawn, I pedal the bike-driven alternator for 20 minutes just to charge the radio's backup power. It burns my legs, but it's worth every drop of sweat if it means you can hear my voice on the air. I broadcast at first light, and just before dusk, the 2 hours when static eases and voices can slip through the ash-thick air. I share what I find. A rivulet still flowing under a bridge near Gardner. Solar still troubleshoots, warnings about sniper-sharp ash banks. But mostly I listen. Your calls, your shouts, your creaks of misery. Sometimes that's the only proof I have. That I'm not alone in this cratered world, hope is my anchor. I cling to the idea that somewhere, maybe in a hollowed-out library basement or an underground spring, there's a patch of green waiting to be reborn. Every time I see a sprig of grass pushing through pumice, I press my palm against it and swear I'll protect that life. It feels like sacrilege to hope in this wasteland, but it's also the only thing that keeps me breathing. My responsibilities weigh heavy. I carry the ghosts of the people I couldn't save. My younger brother, Sean, who tried to shelter in a storm drain and never emerged. My partner, Elena, whose voice cracked with fear as she begged me over the radio to tell her children I loved. Them guilt is a constant companion, whispering that I should have known, done more, stayed closer. Sometimes I replay the last messages I sent, her laughter, his jokes. I hold on to those echoes like fragile fossils. Every day is a choice. When food runs low, I balance the risk of scavenging against the value of a single can of beans. I've learned to read the weather and the ash cloud patterns, know when to move and when to hole up. Raiders, men in scarred leather jackets with pickaxe rifles, prowl the dead highways. I've lost count of how many times I've hidden, heart, pounding beneath overturned cars. But I'm still here, still breathing, still transmitting. Connection drives me as much as hope. When I hear another voice, I feel a flicker of joy until the static cuts out and I'm alone again. I've patched up strangers with iodine, taught kids to catch and purify rainwater, and borrowed a bullet from a kind ex-soldier who needed clean socks more than ammunition. We barter kindness as much as we barter supplies in this shattered society. Sometimes, though, the loneliness hollows me out. I dream of a table with chairs, laughter around bread that doesn't taste like rubber, of someone reaching across to squeeze my hand. Instead, I wake to the hiss of ash on my metal roof and the drone of wind through broken windows. Still, I turn the microphone on. because even the faintest signal means someone, somewhere, is listening. And as long as that is true, we have a reason to keep moving forward. I've come to understand that survival isn't just about preserving flesh and bone. It's about keeping stories alive. The crackle of your voice on the line, the discoveries you share, the little triumphs and tragedies. They build the fragile architecture of our future. So I push on, scavenging for parts, rationing my last bar of chocolate and pedaling that alternator with every ounce of strength left in my body. Because as long as my voice echoes in the darkness, the ember of hope still glows, and I won't let it die. I press record and lean closer to the mic, knowing that what I'm about to report could save lives, or at least buy a few more hours of breath. The true disaster didn't end when the ash stopped falling. In many ways, it's only just begun. The moment Yellowstone erupted, the atmosphere took on a new chemistry. Sulfur dioxide and volcanic ash shot into the stratosphere, scattering across the hemisphere like gray confetti. The sun, once a reliable beacon, now struggles to penetrate. The choking cloud. Solar radiation has plummeted by nearly 60%, and with it, the world has gone dark. Temperatures have dropped an average of 15 degrees Celsius since the eruption began 6 months ago. Winters are no longer seasonal events. They're perpetual. Crops planted in dying fields either freeze beneath a blanket of ash or shrivel in the sudden cold. Where there used to be a gentle spring thaw, now we face acid rain, sulfuric droplets that burn the skin and leach calcium from the soil. Rivers, once brimming with glacial melt, now carry a soup of dissolved metals and sediment. pH readings regularly dip below 4.5, levels lethal to fish and many forms of aquatic life. Water filtration is no longer a convenience. It's a matter of immediate survival. Before the eruption, Yellowstone's rivers and tributaries sustained entire ecosystems and countless towns downstream. Today, surface water is a gamble. Every stream I test with pH strips reads between 4.2 and 5.0, well below the neutral 7.0 that human kidneys can handle without damage. Groundwater wells, too, have been contaminated as percolating rain carries acidic compounds deep into aquifers. Ration what I can. A liter of filtered river water at dawn, a liter at dusk. My DIY filter, a layered assembly of charcoal, sand, and cloth, removes particulate ash but does little against dissolved chemicals. I add a pinch of crushed limestone to each batch to help neutralize acidity. And then I boil it, hoping to kill whatever pathogen survived the chemical assault. Each sip is a reminder that tomorrow's water may not come. The fallout hit agriculture hardest. In belt regions that once fed millions, topsoil now lies buried under a coat of pumice dust up to 10 centimeters thick. Roots suffocate. Seeds germinate only to wither in nights that span weeks. The USDA reports that 85% of commercial farms in the western states have ceased production entirely. In the few working greenhouses left standing, shielded by cracked glass and powered by solar panels, the yields are meager. A handful of radishes, kale leaves the size of playing cards. I forage when I dare. Pocketed grasses that sprout between rubble, the last wild mushrooms clinging to rotting logs. I've learned to identify which fungi still filter toxins and which will kill me in 3 days. I barter what little I have, dried nettles, eldritch-looking mushrooms and a jar of honey I looted from a beehive buried in volcanic debris, for canned goods carried in by the coalition of ash. Every trade involves heartache. A can of beans means a week's worth of nourishment for someone else. Fuel is the third impossible commodity. The ash has fouled most engines. A single spark plug coated in silica can ruin an entire combustion chamber. Gasoline supplies froze. When refineries shut down, and what remained was siphoned off by road gangs. I fuel my generator with wood gasification, dry branches, driftwood, even shredded furniture. The process is inefficient. 1 kilogram of wood yields roughly 2,000 kilojoules, but it's all I have to charge batteries and power the transmitter. When the wind howls through the broken windows of my broadcast shack, I can almost believe the world outside might reclaim itself. Almost. Until I see the horizon filled with black clouds and know the next acid downpour could come at any moment. Let me break down what's happening, so you know the stakes. Volcanic ash consists primarily of amorphous silica and pulverized rock. When inhaled, these particles embed in lung tissue, causing inflammation and scarring, silicosis within weeks. Respirators with P100 filters help, but they're as rare as untainted water. Acid rain forms when sulfur dioxide, SO2, reacts with moisture to produce sulfurous acid, H2SO3, and sulfuric acid, H2SO4. These acids dissolve metals, leach nutrients from soil, and burn foliage. The average rainfall acidity here is pH 3.8, comparable to battery acid. Temperature swings are equally brutal. Daytime highs hover around 5 degrees C in sunlit gaps. Nights plunge below 20 degrees C when ash blankets radiate heat back into the sky. Frost can form at noon. To survive, I layer up. Thermal base layers scavenged from a ski lodge, wool sweaters, and insulated parka lined with emergency blankets. But half the world walks through these extremes in threadbare jackets, teeth chattering and lungs heaving. Crush limestone or antacid tablets into your filtered water and let it settle for 30 minutes before boiling. This raises pH closer to neutral. Seal your windows and vents with plastic sheeting and duct tape. Wear a respirator rated 100. If you must use a cloth mask, wet it with baking soda solution to help trap acid particles. Stick to hardy plants, nettles, chickweed, and clover. Avoid mushrooms unless you're absolutely sure of the species. Some absorb heavy metals from ash-laden soil. Use wood gasification stoves if you have one. Otherwise, build a rocket stove from bricks or cinder blocks to concentrate heat and minimize. Smoke, critical when visibility is low. Line walls with cardboard or old mattresses to trap heat. Hang thermal blankets from the ceiling to reduce drafts and seal cracks around doors with rags soaked in sand. Each dawn, I log these data points, temperature lows and highs, pH readings, ash depth, because science is one weapon we still hold. When I broadcast them, it offers structure to the madness, a map by which others might steer. But the numbers also tell a sorrowful truth. Resources dwindle, conditions worsen, and time is our fiercest enemy. Already we're seeing secondary crises. Without pollinators, the few greenhouse plots depend entirely on hand pollination. Clinics are overwhelmed with respiratory patients. Ventilators lay dormant because fuel for generators is non-existent. Tensions flare in camps when water rations drop from 2 liters to 1. Fights erupt over the last coals in communal stoves. Raiders patrol the outskirts, emboldened by desperation, and their brutality grows as supplies shrink. I don't want to scare you. I want you prepared. Every broadcast is an urgent dispatch. You must dig a deeper well. You must reinforce your shelter. You must share your water and ask nothing in return, because we all stand on the same crust of ash. I've lost track of how many nights I've lain awake, listening to the wind sharpen its howl against my walls. I dream of clear air, of uncharted green valleys, but wake to a world gone grayscale. Some nights I wonder if hope is folly, yet each time I nearly let despair take hold, I remember the face of a child who thanked me for teaching her to mix water with crushed chalk so it wouldn't burn her throat. I recall the tremor in an old man's voice when he received a radio signal for the first time in months. A single human voice cutting through the void. That primal connection keeps us alive. The ash might blot out the sun, the rivers might turn to toxic sludge, and the temperature might plunge to a living hell. But our words, our science, our collective will to survive endures. So I will continue to broadcast every finding, every scrap of data, every precaution and every victory, no matter how small. Because in this gray wasteland, knowledge is oxygen, and as long as we breathe together through these frequencies, we are not yet defeated. I crack open the mic just as the first ember of dawn bleeds through my grimy window. By now I've learned to read the ash cloud's color as a storm warning. Today it's steel gray with streaks of orange, which means acid rain before nightfall. I tighten the straps on my scavenger pack and steel myself for what comes next, because every trip outside now feels like a gambit with death. The rations are nearly gone. 3 weeks ago, I had 6 cans of beans. Today I have 1, and I'm already dreaming of boiling water without worrying about fuel. My woodpile has dwindled to splintered chairs and fence posts, a last resort for the nights when temperatures plunge below 25 degrees Celsius. Even the solar stills are failing. The ash-laden rain clogs the condenser, leaving only a few measly milliliters of water each time I scrape off the plates. I treat every drop like gold, letting it roll across my tongue in the morning. I broadcast these facts openly because knowledge is survival currency. A listener in a desert camp out west relayed how they're melting snow through blackened tarps to raise heat absorption by 10 degrees. Another built a reed bed filter that removes 30% more particulate ash. We swap blueprints, recipes, even crude engineering schematics. And yet, no matter how many innovations we share, the tally of human need outpaces our collective ingenuity. This morning's mission was simple: scavenge the supply depot at the edge of the ghost town. I'd heard it was untouched since the initial eruption. Wood crates stacked high, tents half collapsed but still holding something inside. I approached on foot, boots scuffing against mortar dust, heart hammering louder than the wind in the empty streets. Halfway there, I spotted their silhouettes. 4 figures in warped riot gear, crouched behind an overturned delivery truck. The Mar symbols on their jackets were crude stenciled skulls. The Black Teeth, they call themselves. When they moved, I saw they carried crossbows and homemade suppressors. No shotgun blast or engine roar. They operate in silence, hunting preys. By foot, snatching supplies and people without warning. Dizuk. I ducked into a doorway, stomach knotting. My mind raced through options. Retreat with an empty pack, firefight with fuel-starved rifles, or call them out and hope for mercy. Mercy is a rare commodity these days. I waited, breath shallow, as they rifled through crates, tossing aside tin cans and water jugs, indifferent to what they left behind. They didn't notice me slip away, thank God for that. Back at the shack, my pulse finally slowed, but the fear lingered. If they decide that you have something they want, they'll return with a dozen more. I pressed record and warned everyone on the frequency. Black Teeth are moving east, high alert. If you see figures in riot gear, do not engage. Evacuate immediately. Later, a crackling voice broke into my broadcast. Maya, this is Harper. Junction 6. We've got a load of canned peaches and fuel cells if you want to trade for water purification tablets. Junction 6 is a caravan that moves between old military checkpoints. I've heard rumors they're ex-soldiers, disciplined eye, and well-armed. Some say they massacre anyone who can't pay their price. Others swear they distribute medicine and fight off raiders. Nobody knows which stories are true. I hesitated. My water tablets are all I have left to neutralize the acid. But the peaches could last a month, and fuel cells would keep the generator alive through the next ash storm. I hammered out a reply. Meet me at the old Ranger lookout at dusk. I'll come alone. As I prepped my pack, my thoughts churned. Trusting others after everything that's happened feels like a luxury I can't afford. But isolation is death by inches. The caravan could be salvation, or the Black Teeth in new uniforms. By midday, the wind had picked up, whipping ash into microscopic needles that cut through fabric and skin. Visibility dropped to 20 meters, temperatures crashed, and the barometer readings on my makeshift gauge plummeted. This front was stronger than any we'd seen in months. I taped plastic over my windows and braced the door. Even inside, the stove's flame flickered under the pressure change. I pressed my ear to the radio, scanning every frequency for warnings. In the background, I heard frantic calls from a coastal settlement. Tidal surge incoming. Pump stations offline. We need help. I saved the message, thinking how unlikely it was for oceanfront communities to survive an inland volcanic winter. But off-world threats are now the norm. That evening, I packed for my meeting with Junction 6. My boots felt leaden. My back ached from hauling water barrels yesterday. Yet something propelled me forward. A whispered rumor too tantalizing to ignore. A scientist, name unknown, claimed to have found a subterranean aquifer east of an abandoned phosphate mine. He called it Project Ararat, a reference to the biblical mountain that saved life after the flood. Some say the data is fabricated to lure desperate souls. Others swear the coordinates are genuine. I tucked a hand-drawn map into my jacket pocket. The prospect of real water, untouched by acid rain, was a beacon in the darkness. If Ararat exists, it could change everything. Allow replanting of crops, fuel pumped from wells, communities to form around clean springs. But if it's a mirage, chasing it will be a one-way trip. I'd heard of caravans disappearing en route to miracle sites. I stared at my reflection in the radio's dark screen. Ash crusted my hair. Dark circles etched under my eyes. Part of me pleaded to stay in my shelter, too weary to risk betrayal or ambush. Another part, fueled by guilt and a need to give others a chance at normalcy, pounded through my chest like a war drum. What if I left the transmitter behind? The world would lose its only lifeline to updates and survivors would be blind. What if I stayed? The black teeth might return, or a snowstorm could collapse my roof, or starvation could claim me quietly in my sleep. I recognized the truth. Survival is never static. It's always a series of impossible choices. And every day we choose to hope. We choose to risk everything. At dusk, I pedaled out toward the lookout. Once a vantage point for park rangers, now a rotting platform above a gaping chasm. The wind moaned through its beams like a dying beast. Lantern in hand, I waited, heart thudding. A cloud of dust announced their arrival. A convoy of 3 rusted pickup beds rolled in, headlights dimmed by ash filters. Out stepped Harper, ACE, tall woman in patched combat fatigues, eyes sharp beneath a visor. Behind her stood 2 others, a bulky mechanic and a wiry scout, both armed but relaxed. I dropped my pack at my feet. Harper's gaze flicked to the map, Project Ararat, tucked in my pocket. She raised an eyebrow, as if she'd expected nothing less. "You're braver than most," she said quietly. I swallowed. "Or more foolish." She smiled, something genuine, though faded. "Trade, then story." She gestured to her load. Crates of peaches, fuel cells, and in the center a sealed plastic drum. 2 liters of water, pH neutral, field tested. My breath hitched. We bartered. 10 water neutralizing tablets, my last roll of duct tape, and the map. In exchange, I filled my pack with peaches, grabbed 3 fuel cells, and gratefully took the drum. My hands shook as I jerry-rigged it to my backpack straps. Harper leaned in, voice low. "You're not the only one chasing Ararat, but we've got scouts heading that way. If you want company or supplies, you'll find us at milepost 40. I nodded, chest aching with relief and dread. "I'll be there." I pedaled back under ash cloud moonlight, the weight of the drum sloshing at my side. Each rotation of the wheel felt like a promise. We can do this. We can find that aquifer, save what remains. But with every promise comes peril. On the horizon, the ash storm front roared toward me, and the distant headlights of the black teeth cut through the gloom. I clenched my teeth, tightened my grip on the handlebars, and pedaled faster into uncertainty. Because hope is a risk, and in this fractured world, nothing worth having ever comes easy. I flipped the switch on my transmitter one last time before Dawn, voice quavering through the static. "This is Maya Sinclair, coordinates set. I'm heading into the mine. If this is the end of my signal, know you fought with me." I'm both terrified and exhilarated. Today, everything changes, or everything ends. The entrance to the phosphate mine yawns like a great black maw against the ash-scoured hillside. I've never seen anything darker. The miner's story, Project Ararat, spoke of an untouched aquifer deep beneath these tunnels, shielded from acid rain and volcanic seepage. If it's real, we could refill wells, restart greenhouses, even rebuild communities. If it's a lie, these tunnels will be my tomb. I tighten the straps on my headlamp and shoulder my pack. 3 fuel cells, a half-empty canteen of neutralized water, and the radio transmitter, now running on its final cell. Behind me, Junction 6's convoy rumbles in. Harper's 3 pickups loaded with survivors and supplies. They've agreed to stand guard here. But as soon as I step inside, it's my gamble alone. The air in the shaft is colder, denser, filled, with the hiss of dripping water. Not acid-laden rain, but pure droplets that patter softly on bedrock. My beam cuts through half-darkness. Corroded rails, cracked wooden supports, abandoned carts still laden with phosphates. Every footstep echoes, reminding me how alone I am. My heart hammers in my chest like a jackhammer. 50 meters in, I come to a junction. 3 tunnels branch off. One slopes gently downward and is slick with moisture. Another collapses in on itself. The third angles up, choked with rubble. The map Harper gave me marks the downward tunnel as the path. I pause, tracing the lines on the napkin with a trembling finger, then press forward into the damp. Halfway down the incline, I hear it. The scuff of boots, low voices. Raiders, the black teeth. I freeze, breath caught in my throat. In front of me, a torch beam flickers. 2 silhouettes stomping through ankle-deep puddles. My mind races. Turn back and risk losing the only chance at water, or slip past them and hope they don't notice. I crouch behind a rusted cart and hold my breath as they pass so close I could hear their ragged breathing. One kicks at a puddle, splashing water onto his boot, and swears. Suddenly, their torchlight swings directly over my hiding spot. My pulse thunders. My mind flashes to the transmitter battery in my pack. How it could save 100 lives, how it could end in their hands. But they move on. I wait 2 minutes more, then silently crawl past them, keeping the wall at my side. Every nerve screams for me to run, to abandon this folly. But I press on. If I don't, nothing changes. At the bottom of the shaft, I find an iron ladder bolted into the rock. It leads to a metal door, warped and rusted shut. I set down my pack and use my multi-tool to pry it open, muscles trembling. Beyond lies a cavern so vast my headlamp can't touch its far wall. At its center, a pool glistens, liquid as black as obsidian, until I splash a drop on my finger. It's clear, cold, and tastes of smooth stone and promise. Tears burn my eyes. I kneel and cup the water, letting its weight fill me with awe. This miracle exists. The map was true. The aquifer survived the eruption, perched here untouched. I fill my canteen again, and begin looping the hose of my collapsible pump into the pool, setting up my solar charger and power cell. I record every step, every reading. pH 7.2, temperature 40 degrees C, mineral content negligible. This is science in service of salvation. I broadcast a short message. Ararat is real. Fresh water found. Coordinates confirmed. Repeat, fresh water found. Suddenly, the beam from Harper's torch sweeps across the chamber's entrance, followed by the black teeth's snarled voices. My heart lurches. The convoy must have followed me in, but so did the raiders. I scramble to gather my pack. Water, now added, and duck behind a stalagmite. A black-teeth lieutenant steps forward, crossbow aimed at my head. Harper raises her hands, voice firm. "No more fighting, Maya. We can share this." The lieutenant laughs, low and cruel. "You led us here. The caravan wants water, but he wants your radio, girl. He says life without hope is easier." I stand, canteen in hand, and face them both. 2 futures lie before me. Hand over my equipment, radio map pump, and walk away to live or die with a drip of water in my pack, or fight for the broadcast, for knowledge, for countless lives beyond this cavern. My blood hammers. I remember Sean's laughter, Elena's last message, the child who first thanked me for clean water. I think of every listener who fought, innovated, survived on a whisper of my signal. Hope isn't just this water. It's our shared will to endure. I step forward. "You can have the water," I say quietly, "but not the radio." I drop my pack at their feet and hold up the canteen. "This is the last leader. Take it. Save yourselves. But this," I gesture to the transmitter strapped to my belt, "this stays with me." The Black Teeth lieutenant's eyes blaze. He motions, and two of his men unsling rifles. I tighten my grip on the transmitter, ready to sprint. Harper steps beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder. She nods once. Time stretches. In the cavern's hush, the only sounds are dripping water and ragged breathing. Then the lieutenant signals his men to lower their rifles. They take the canteen and stomp away into the darkness, leaving the other two leaders in the drum behind. Harper exhales a breath I didn't know she was holding. I press the trigger on my radio and broadcast in a firm voice. People of the wasteland, water flows anew. Coordinates are accurate. Gather at Junction 6. Hope is real. Static crackles. But my words carry. Somewhere far beyond this mine, someone hears me. I see that now. The Black Teeth might claim the canteen, but they can't silence thousands of voices joined in that declaration. The stun of adrenaline ebbs, replaced by a deep, shaking relief. We haul barrels of water out of the pool, Harper's caravan forming. A human chain, each passing filled barrel toward the ladder. I stay behind, watching until the last drum is drawn up, until the only light in the chamber is my fading headlamp beam. I look around at these ancient walls, scarred by time and now by catastrophe. I think of the world above, crusted in ash, but still alive beneath that shell. I think of every person who refused to surrender to endless winter and bone-dry rivers. Here, in the bowels of the earth, I find the turning point. Not just for me, but for all of us. This water is a lifeline, but the real breakthrough is knowing that we still care enough to share it, to fight for it, and to broadcast its promise across a world that desperately needs to believe in miracles. Again, as I climb the ladder, chest tight, I whisper a vow. I will keep this signal alive. I will map every spring, every well, every glimmer of green that breaks through the gray. I will not let this moment slip into legend. It will become our blueprint for rebuilding. When I emerge into dawn's murky light, barrels and survivors. At my heels, I realize the choice I made, water over weapon, hope over fear, has already rippled outward. Faces that greeted me were no longer hollow with desperation, but shining with cautious belief. I broadcast again, my voice strong. We have turned a corner. We rise from the ash with water, with unity, with hope. This is Maya Sinclair, and we are still here. The storm clouds overhead may yet unleash acid rain, and the Black Teeth may regroup. But in this moment, we have seized our destiny. The world's broken bones will knit over time, as long as we keep telling our story and hearing each other's voices through the dark. That is the true turning point. The first barrels of aquifer water rolled into Junction 6 with a slow, hopeful clatter. Wooden wheels groaning over ash-packed earth. I stood at the convoy's edge, watching survivors unload drums onto patched pallets. Faces once etched with desperation now bore something softer. Wonder. For weeks, we'd rationed every drop of rainwater, dreaded each filter clog, whispered fears of dehydration in the dark. Now we watched as pails of crystal-clear liquid splashed into waiting buckets, filling bellies, washing grime from skin, offering something we'd almost forgotten. Relief. Within 24 hours, word. Project Ararat had spread to every camp within radio range. Men and women, bending under the weight of buckets, trudged up the hill to my shack, once a solitary outpost of static and ash, now a bustling hub of coordination. I organized schedules for pump teams, training volunteers how to operate the portable solar pumps and sterilize hoses. A former chemistry teacher set up a makeshift lab to test each barrel's mineral content, ensuring we could blend the water judiciously with what little rainwater still trickled through filters. For the first time since the eruption, survival felt collaborative instead of solitary. But hope came at a price. Raiders, hearing of the newfound water source, began stalking the convoy routes. On the third morning after the discovery, Black Teeth scouts ambushed a supply run. 2 carts of drums were lost. Barrels shattered on the rocks, survivors beaten and left for dead. I rushed to the site, heart sick with dread, and spent hours treating wounds, gathering what salvageable water remained in the mud. The assault was a stark reminder that every gift in this world demands vigilance. We reinforced caravan guards, and rerouted convoys along more hidden paths. But the cost weighed heavily. Hope, I learned, can be a beacon for both salvation and predation. Late that night, after I'd patched up the last victim and secured the camp's perimeter, I sat alone by the generator lantern and let exhaustion wash over me. My hands still trembled from the day's work, mixing antiseptic, tightening bandages. In that flickering light, I realized how little I'd allowed myself to celebrate. 3 months ago, I would have crumpled at the sight of fresh water. Now I promised I would remember this moment. The cold tang on my tongue, the soft gasp of someone taking a full, unhurried breath. I thought of Sean, of Elena, of every lost voice I'd carried in my guilt-laden heart. In saving others, I was salvaging a part of myself I thought irretrievably broken. The guilt softened, replaced by purpose. I was no longer simply the voice in the static. I was a catalyst for change, a guardian of life's most basic element. Outside camp, the world remained harsh, but I began to notice subtle shifts. Near the pump station, tiny shoots of grass had sprouted through cracks in the pavement, an intrusion of green against the gray. A ragged row of wild mustard nodded in the breeze beside an abandoned guardrail. The local groundwater, once contaminated, showed traces of microbial life returning. The chemistry teacher's tests registered a slight uptick in dissolved oxygen levels. It wasn't a renaissance, but a whisper of resilience beneath the ruin. The acid rain clouds still churned overhead, and ash storms continued to lash the land with abrasive fury. Yet where water flowed freely, the soil's pH began to rise toward neutrality. In the microcosm of Junction 6, we witnessed marsh marigolds blooming in the spring-fed ditches and dragonflies, fragile icons of renewal, skirting the water's edge at dawn. By the end of the first week, Junction 6 had organized itself into zones, filtration, medical triage, pump maintenance, and even a small barter market. Survivors with skill sets, carpenters, coders, librarians, offered services in exchange for water rations. Newspapers printed on old ledger pages chronicled daily water yields and survival tips. We erected a whiteboard beneath my broadcast antenna, listing radio times and coordinates for those embarking on the Ararat route. It felt like building civilization from scratch, each milestone a knotted thread in a fragile tapestry of recovery. I broadcast less as a lone voice and more as a network node, relaying updates and collecting reports. My broadcasts evolved into town hall forums. Survivors called in to share discoveries, how to inoculate greenhouse soils with beneficial microbes, how to retrofit wind turbines with scavenged motors, how to manage rat infestations drawn by standing water. We riffed off each other's knowledge, constructing a web of collective intelligence stronger than any single brain. Despite our progress, shadows lingered. The Black Teeth were not the only threat. A rogue faction calling themselves the Ashborn believed that water had poisoned the Earth's spirit. They raided farms and flooded greenhouses, convinced that humanity had overreached. Rumors told of a sniper perched atop a silo, picking off pickers in the fields below. Fear, I realized, was as contagious as hope, and sometimes harder to dispel. Spent nights reviewing security plans, training watch squads, and broadcasting coded warnings. Every triumph had its price in vigilance. Yet each evening, as I powered down the transmitter and let darkness settle, I felt a quiet satisfaction. We had water, we had community, we had purpose. The world hadn't healed, but we had the tools to defend our fledgling recovery. Through it all, I changed. The guilt that once anchored me like an anchor dragging through ash had receded. In its place grew a fierce gratitude for clean water, for the ingenuity of strangers, for the hum of the generator that still carried my voice. I began to dream again, not of the old world, but of a new one. A network of spring-fed enclaves linked by radio, restored wetlands circling recaptured rivers, fields of barley beneath solar panels. At dusk, I paused on the lookout platform, the same one where I'd first met Harper. The horizon was bruised with ash clouds, but in the valley below, lantern lights flickered like fireflies. I lowered my pack and let the wind carry the radio's low hum across the camp. I thought, this is what survival looks like. Not merely enduring each day, but forging meaning in the ruins. Weeks passed, and the first caravan embarked for other settlements armed with water drums and blueprints. I heard later how one group resurrected a school inside an old gymnasium, teaching children to measure pH and build solar stills. Another mapped the aquifer's limits with ground-penetrating radar, courtesy of a scavenged research rig, to guide new pump sites. Each success echoed back to me in grateful messages, crammed into the radio's narrow bandwidth, yet reminders of our fragility appeared relentlessly. A faulty valve flooded an entire filtration array. A sudden tremor loosened boulders above. A tunnel, reminding us how little we controlled the earth beneath our feet. We adapted, redesigned piping, shored up tunnels, tested seismic sensors. In the end, resilience proved to be an ongoing exercise, not a destination. Standing alone at the edge of the river that now flowed again, I watched silvery currents unspool over stones once buried in cinder. The water carried a faint tang of mineral, but it brimmed with life. Tadpoles darted, water striders skimmed the surface, and moss began to recolonize the damp banks. Above me, the ashen sky cracked open for a moment, a sliver of pale blue. I closed my eyes, letting the rush of water fill my senses. I thought of every soul who believed me when I first spoke. The frightened voice on the line, the scavenger who rigged his respirator, the teacher who risked raider patrols to guide his students. We were, each of us, a single drop in this torrent of rebirth. None of us could have done it alone, but together, through sacrifice, ingenuity, and stubborn hope, we coaxed a wounded world back toward life. As night fell, I returned to the shack and keyed the mic one last time for the hour. My voice was softer now, tempered by months of hardship and the warmth of shared triumph. We hold water in our hands tonight, I said. But tomorrow, we hold the power to choose who we become. This world changed us with ash and acid, but we can answer with life and light. Go well and remember, even the heaviest damage can yield green shoots if we dare to plant them. I ended the broadcast and sat in silence, listening to the hum of the generator and the distant laughter of children playing by the river. The world remained fractured, but the spark of hope burned brighter than ever. And as long as we tended that flame, together, we would survive and perhaps someday thrive in the land reborn from ash. I flipped the switch one last time tonight, the generator's hum steady beneath my voice. Outside, the ash-choked sky has yielded a faint shimmer of starlight, an ember of the old world peeking through the gray. I speak softly, as if not to wake the survivors who sleep in this makeshift camp of lanterns and patched tarps. We learned that hope is as delicate as a dewdrop on ash, easily evaporated by despair, yet breathtaking in its fragility. Tonight, that drop is our water spring, still flowing in the hollow beneath the mine. We've seen plants push through pumice, seen children dip their fingers into clear buckets and laugh at the cold sting. It's small, but it's enough. It's a seed in a field of ruin waiting to take root. I think of the first time I tasted that subterranean water, how it felt like forgiveness on my tongue. In that moment, I understood. Survival is never just about flesh and bone. It's about the moments that remind us why we fight. A single fish darting in a restored stream. A bird's hesitant song at dawn. The warmth of another hand clasped in yours. These moments are fragile, but they are proof that life endures in the cracks. We are not miraculously safe. Storm fronts still barrel in, laden with acidic fury. Raiders prowl the roads, and factions like the Ashborn still lash out against anything that dares to flourish. Fuel remains scarce, and winter's edge never truly retreats here. The wells we opened are finite. The green shoots we coaxed must be protected and nurtured carefully. Survival is not a destination. It's an unending journey across shifting landscapes. Each day we patch our shelters, rotate our water routes, reforge alliances, or stand our ground. There is no final victory, only a series of small triumphs. A well that doesn't go dry. A greenhouse that yields a single head of lettuce. A camp. Free of gunfire for a week. My role as the voice on the airwaves has changed. I used to broadcast warnings and stats. Now I share stories of resilience, of farmers who swapped canned peaches for potato slivers to plant next season's crop, of engineers jury-rigging wind turbines from scavenged parts, of children teaching their elders how to charge batteries with pedal power. Each story is a lantern carried through the night, lighting the way for others who still grip their radios in the darkness. I remind them that every spark of ingenuity, every act of compassion, is a thread in the tapestry we're weaving together. We are not alone. We resist not only the elements, but the despair that would have us believe the world ended with the... I close my eyes and let the silence fill the frequency for a moment. I remember the first broadcast, the tremble in my voice, the loneliness that echoed in the static, the guilt that weighed like lead in my chest. Tonight, as I speak, my voice is steadier. I have lived through more nights than I care to count. Faced the sting of acid rain, the hunger that clawed at my gut, the loneliness that nearly hollowed me out. And I am still here. I am still here not because I am particularly strong, but because I believed in something bigger than myself. I believed that stories matter, that every transmission, every shared blueprint, every ragged prayer into the void kept someone, somewhere, from giving up. Tomorrow I will board a convoy to scout new pump sites. I will visit camps beyond our broadcast range and teach them how to test their wells. I will carry extra filters, extra seeds, extra hope. I will return here and rebuild the greenhouses we lost to Ashbourne sabotage. I will train watch teams to guard the springs. I will pace the perimeter when the wind howls, and then I will climb back onto the airwaves and tell you what I see, because this work never ends. We may plant forests one sapling at a time, but the winds can strip away every leaf. We may build communities, but factions can tear them down. So we rebuild, again and again, each time a little wiser, each time a little stronger. So listen closely. Carry water in your canteens, but carry kindness in your hearts. Sharpen your wits to innovate, but temper your inventions with compassion. Guard your springs, but guard your humanity even more fiercely. The ash may settle, the rain may corrode, and the nights may grow bitterly cold. But as long as we speak, as long as we share our knowledge and our stories, we hold a spark that not even the darkest storm can fully extinguish. Stay alive, stay curious, stay human, and know that somewhere in the gray, I'm listening, and sending back whatever courage I can muster for the road ahead. This is Maya Sinclair signing off for now. Until the next dawn, keep the signal burning.